On this episode of Still Loading, please listen to the end of the episode to learn how you can order your own crotchetizer. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this new episode of the Still Loading podcast. I am your host, Josh Koval, and today, oh man, it has been a long time since I have covered a game from Insomniac Games, and let me tell you, this is one of my personal favorites. Back in 2020, I did the Summer of PlayStation 2, and I covered the original Ratchet Clank game with my buddy Tristan. Well, finally, we are covering the second game in the series, Ratchet & Clank Going Commando. And with me today to discuss Ratchet & Clank Going Commando, not Going Commando themselves, is Kelly from the Precisely podcast. Kelly, how are you doing today?
I'm great, thanks. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I actually met you through Instagram. You have a really besides just your podcast, you have an amazing game collection that I always enjoy seeing, and all the various adventures that you go around. And we actually got to meet up for the first time at Too Many Games. So, all you listeners out there, going to conventions is great networking. So you should definitely do that. So I got to finally meet you in person at Too Many Games, and we talked for a little bit, and then I was looking for a guest for an upcoming episode, and you were so gracious enough to agree to come on and spend some time. So thank you, seriously, for coming on the podcast. Now, I threw out a couple options to you about what game we were going to talk about. I threw out a bunch of games that were on my list that I either wanted to do or I wanted to redo, but you specifically threw out Ratchet and Clank as one of your favorite series. So I was wondering, how did you first come to know our Lord and Savior Ratchet and his son Clank and the Holy Spirit of Nebula? I don't know where I'm going with this metaphor. How did you get into the Ratchet and Clank series?
So when I got a PlayStation 2 for Christmas when I was I don't know, probably anywhere from 10 to 12. I don't remember when that came out exactly for me, but I got it for Christmas, and my parents, it was also at the advent of Costco for our area. So my parents had a Costco membership heavily on peer pressure from their friends, and were exclusive Costco shoppers, but they bought the PS2 at Costco. So we got the big old clamshell pack. Yeah, I'm sure you've probably seen stuff like that now, like when people are talking about historical gaming packages, the big old clamshell pack where it's the console itself, and then it was bundled probably with a controller and then 2 games. So one was ATV Off-Road Fury 2, which again, I have a ton of nostalgia for because I played the crap out of that, but I couldn't care about ATVs outside of that. And then the second one was Ratchet and Clank. And so that was like the 2 pack-in games for the Costco PS2, and we got it for Christmas, and I fell in love with that game so immediately. I cannot tell you how many times I know I said earlier I've probably beaten Going Commando probably at least 5 times in my life, and I've had that since it came out, but I can't tell you how many times I beat the original either. Like, it just is one of those games that I just I don't know, I just feel it in my bones that I need to replay it. And then I just go for it, and it's so second nature at this point that it's like coming home, and just relaxing, because you really don't have to think too much, but you still get to enjoy the game that you have a ton of nostalgia for, and it makes you feel good. So
this game is, I think, what really made the Ratchet and Clank series for me my favorite series. Like, when people ask me what my favorite video games are, I usually say Ratchet and Clank. And it's funny because I mentioned before, my buddy Tristan did the first episode of on the first Ratchet and Clank with me, and he's the one that actually kind of has probably guided my gaming taste the most out of all my friends, because I was always one of those people who would play a game. I played through the original Uncharted. I'm like, oh, that's fine. and I just didn't like. I played through it, and for some reason it just didn't like. It clicked with me because I played through it, but it wasn't one of those ones where I thought about a lot afterwards. And it was the same with Ratchet and Clank. Now I would say, Uncharted, Ratchet and Clank, these are some of my favorite series. But when I played them for the first time, there was like no emotion. It was almost I was a robot playing through them. There was like no emotion attached to the experience, which is very strange. But with Ratchet and Clank 2, Going Commando, the way I remember it was I got a PS2 for Christmas. Well, not me, my brothers and I, we all shared it, and we rented the first Ratchet and Clank from Blockbuster when that was a thing.
Mm-hmm.
And we would rent Ratchet and Clank and play it. And Tristan would come up to my house, and we would, because he saw the advertisements for it and he really wanted to try it. So he played a little bit of it at my house, and he liked it so much that he bought a PS2 and Ratchet and Clank off of eBay. And this was before I knew you could use eBay for this type of thing. So like this was all new and fancy to me. I'm like, oh man, you're ordering something off the internet? What? That's amazing. And I remember the day he got Ratchet and Clank, I actually like rode down to his house, and I watched him play Ratchet and Clank 2, and he actually played through all of them, Ratchet 1 through 3. I was the Jack and Daxter fan, and he was the Ratchet and Clank fan, and then he converted me. He switched my alignment over to Ratchet and Clank. So those are some of my memories with it. And I might have said this in the first Ratchet and Clank episode, but maybe someone hasn't listened to that because that's also almost 2 years old now. So it's been quite some time since I've done an episode on an Insomniac game, let alone my favorite gaming franchise. And Ratchet and Clank Going Commando, I really think is where the series gets its footing. This is where everything kind of flips. You can see the like every subsequent Ratchet and Clank game. Now I haven't played a Rift Apart. Have you played a Rift Apart yet?
No, I have it, but I do not have a PS5. So I kind of reverse did that, but I wanted the game, and I think there was a pre-order bonus at GameStop for like a skin or something, and they told me the code wouldn't go bad. So I was like, whenever I can get my mitts on a PS5, which I still haven't. So
It's
says a
so
lot
it's
about me.
Yeah, but like it's also you don't want to buy from a scalper. I guested on a podcast someone recently, and the guy's like, I spent what did he spend? I think he spent like 600 or 650 for a scalped PS5. I was like, you know what? That's not a bad price for a scalped PS5. I still
Yeah.
wouldn't pay them for that, but that's not a bad price for a scalped PS5.
No, it's
I
not as
feel
bad
like
as
it.
it used to be.
No, it's a little bit easier to get them now, but I honestly just can't afford justify like spending $500 on a console right now. I would love to, but I got to be a responsible parent, and it sucks. It's the worst decision. Not really. I love my daughter, but but I can't buy it at the moment. But I digress. So what I was going to say, because I wasn't sure if it was I would assume it's the same in Rift Apart, that this game, like if you play every other Ratchet and Clank game since this, you can see this game's elements, this game's roots really strongly in all of them. Like the first game set up a whole lot, like obviously a little bit of like its art style and art direction, a little bit of the characters, you get a small taste of the sense of humor, the whole collecting bolts, having a whole bunch of different weapons, and kind of like the shoot 'em up platforming mashup that this series goes for. That's all in the first game, but the second game, it offers so much more. Like there's so much to it. So before I kind of go into some of the different things, what is one of your favorite additions in Ratchet and Clank 2 compared to the first one?
So I remember when we got this game. I remember that I think it was either my cousin or my neighbor that got it first, and we were playing it, and I was like, "Holy crap, this is next level!" And they like were like, "You want to borrow it?" And I was like, "Yeah." So I borrowed the game, and then
Did you ever give it back to them?
yes, no, I borrowed it, and I beat the game, gave it back, and then like begged my parents to get a copy, and so Yeah, that one, and then Up Your Arsenal was like a similar situation that it was like I borrowed a copy and then had to beg to get my own copy because my parents weren't keen on buying video games. Look how that turned out. Uh, but but no, I remember getting that and like watching it and then playing it myself and being like, everything that they did in the first game, they just cranked it. Like they cranked it up to like 11 on everything. It was like
Mm-hmm.
the maps were so much more fun. The
Mm-hmm.
weapons were so much like there were just it was like sure you had like a general and we'll get into weapons I'm sure like we had like
Oh yeah.
general styles of weapons but then you got into this one you're like there's some really wacky stuff and like not wacky in the sense like I can't use this but it's just weird but there was like wacky with like this is really useful in this game. So that was one of my favorite things is that it just really they did that first game and then they were just like well I guess we can just keep going and I was like please do because this was I think this might have been like my favorite out of the three that of the original trilogy.
It's funny. I would have said the same thing, and then so when they did the HG remakes in 2012, which no, it's fucked up. We didn't even talk about this right off the top of the bat. This is the 20th anniversary of Ratchet and Clank this year.
And there's nothing being released.
Oh, that's true. Why would they did? And even their 10th anniversary was kind of lackluster. They released the HD collection, and then they released Full Frontal Assault, which was like the tower defense, which is a fun game, but I don't really think that's like
No.
that was like a that was a cheap game too. Like not saying that it was cheap to make, but I mean like in terms of cost for the
Yeah.
consumer, it was they only charged like $40 for it. So it wasn't like an official entry in the Ratchet series. It was kind of more of like a side like an offshoot of it. So it was kind of weird that for their 10th anniversary they just did HG remakes and an offshoot game. So it was kind of lackluster overall. Like I don't it's weird cuz like they had the hype for a Rift Apart was huge last year. Like it was incredibly hyped up. I mean, apparently from everything I've heard, it's an amazing game and it looks
Mm-hmm.
beautiful. So it's like they definitely still care about the Ratchet series, but it's just strange they didn't do anything for the 20th anniversary. But anyway, so yes, we are at the 20th anniversary of the game. And when I was replaying all the original trilogy on the 10th anniversary back in 2012 on the HG remakes, playing through Up Your Arsenal, I was pleasantly surprised by how much I ended up liking it. I remember not liking that game as much, but then replaying it, I don't know that I found it like I enjoyed it a lot more than I thought I was going to. But we're not here to talk about Up Your Arsenal as much as I was about to digress into that. The big
That's okay.
additions. What? Sorry.
I was gonna say that's okay. We can digress.
We can digress. We can. I mean, we'll go through all of them eventually.
Yeah.
Um, the big difference there's a I shouldn't say the big difference. There's a lot of changes that they made, but not changes in a bad way. I've never seen a game that I shouldn't say never, but this is a game that I think does such a phenomenal job of changing a lot from the original game, but still making it feel like the original game. Like it still feels like Ratchet and Clank. It doesn't feel like it's that far removed from the original game. And the things that they add, obviously, a bunch of new planets, a bunch of new worlds. I believe there is like the planets in general are larger. There are more worlds for you to explore. The weapons you get can level up. So you no longer, so if they only have 12 weapons, they each level up and they basically added RPG elements. So in the first game, in order for you to get more health, you would have to find more nanotech, and that would permanently increase the amount of nanotech you have. In this, however many enemies you take out gives you experience, and as you play through the game, your nanotech bar fills up and it gives you another nanotech block of health. And so by the end, you can have like tons and tons and tons of blocks, and you can take a lot more hits, which is awesome. It makes it a lot of fun. It gives you a reward for defeating a bunch of enemies. And then on top of that, not only do you get experience, not only are there RPG elements towards Ratchet, there's RPG elements on his weapons as well. So every weapon that you buy upgrades into something different. So for example, you have like the Seeker gun, and then it turns into the HK 22 gun. And they do similar things, but they, one's just slightly different. So if there was like 13 of the base weapons in the original, or before you level them up, you get a whole new weapon once they leveled up. So essentially you have like 26. I forget how many total there are. I actually have the list in front of me, and I don't really feel like counting them all right now because that'd be a little boring. But there is so many different weapons in this game, and they really do a lot of amazing things with them. What are some of your favorite weapons in this game?
So I was trying to think about that earlier when I was like, because I know you've been kind of replaying through it, and
Hmm.
I I barely have time for anything, but I would, and I really was working on replaying the full series in numerical order
Hmm.
over the last couple of years as I've had time, and I finished Up Your Arsenal last, so I kind of am still, um, thinking about going Commando. But I think that like I really
You
like
are? You're thinking about doing that?
I might just go back again and start all over. Just keep playing the first three over and over. Um, but no, I think like one of my favorite ones is like I'm always like we talked about Up Your Arsenal a little bit, and the big like one to me feels like more of a platformer. Two
Yes.
feels like a marriage between a platformer and a shooter style, and then three feels like Ratchet and Clank, but also Halo is how I kind of see it,
I
like a
could
weird,
see that because there's like rangers and
like
stuff
a
in it.
war
Like
strategy kind of vibe to it.
a little bit, yeah.
But like not heavy, but it was just more so than the other. Like we've never introduced
Yeah.
like these drop ships battles and whatever, which was fine, but it was just like completely different than like, robot enemies and little fluffy stuff you've been chopping with a wrench for the last two games. But in two, I definitely heavily used for close combat. I really like the Blitz cannon. That one was
Yes.
a good one. Um, and then I was always a fan of just kind of like if things got nasty, just equipping the lava gun and just going in circles and just creating a lava circle around me as I just like keep
Is
going.
it is it weird? I actually kind of prefer the lava gun to the meteor gun, which is its upgrade technically.
Yeah, no, I like the lava gun way better than the meteor
Yeah,
gun.
because you would shoot lava out of it, and it would still kind of dribble out of the tip.
Yeah,
That's a little
yeah,
gross,
yeah. No,
but
yeah,
it's still,
it was a little
I,
gross.
but it would still kind of dribble out a little bit, so that way you could still do damage. With the meteor gun, you don't get that. Like it once you shoot, it just shoots a meteor out, and that's
Hmm.
it. So you don't feel like you're covering as much of a spread, weirdly enough, as you do with the lava gun. You know.
Yeah, yeah,
I think for me, I really enjoyed the mini rocket tube. I
yep,
really liked it just because it was so versatile. Even though you didn't have that much ammo. Excuse me. My other favorite one in terms of something that just amused me is the black sheepinator. Just the idea that you can turn an enemy into a sheep and then they explode shortly after that. And I loved in this is a little bit of a side tangent, but in the Ratchet and Clank remake for PS4, they give you they kind of do something similar, but you turn enemies into goats, and then the goats fart rainbows, and then they turn the other enemies into goats with their farting rainbows.
yep.
It's oh my god, I love this series. And that kind of leads me to another point though with going Commando. They in this game, the sense of humor is like magnified so much. The first game was humorous, but would you agree with me? Like this, the second game is where they kind of found their humor in the series.
Yeah, I think they were like in the like the first one. I remember like like I said, so I was a kid when this was happening, but like I remember like, oh, the plumber's back, and it was like a plumber's crack joke, and we were like, that's the funniest thing I've ever heard. and and then I felt like as I like played it more and like as I got older and stuff, I picked up on different things. But then in 2, they definitely had way more like subtle adult humor, and 3 even too. There was like, well, they had Courtney Gears and stuff like that,
Yeah.
but that's a whole other thing. But yeah, so it was like they definitely could try to like amp it up a little bit, but still kept it to, what was it, a T rating. So it
Yeah.
wasn't like obviously like a dirt, like obviously the title itself, there it is. Like they were like, we can kind of make it like stupid adult humor, but keep it PG for the kids that are playing it, because it looks like a kid's game. Like it's this cute little guy with these furry ears and a little robot friend. Like what kid wouldn't want to play that game? So
Right.
they like towed the line very fine, and they did a great job with it.
This is the game that also started the double entendre titles that they kind of dropped. Like a rift apart isn't really a double entendre as far as I can tell. Can you hear
Neither
one in
is
there?
like a lot of the PS3 titles.
Yeah,
They're not.
the closest one for that might be like, well, so I watched a Did You Know gaming thing on that, and so the All for One game, like
Mhm.
it was like the 4-player co-op thing that was
Yeah,
going to be called 4Play.
yes. And then they had I think it was like, I don't know if it was online only here or whatever, or maybe it was just in Europe or something, but they had Quest for Booty. That was the only one that would.
That's that's ours. We got that as well. That was a
Okay, I
digital
couldn't
only
remember.
thing.
Yeah, I couldn't remember because I didn't have money in the PS3 era, so being in
You
college.
did not miss much with Quest for Booty.
Yeah.
It's meant to be in between a Crack in Time and Tools of Destruction. I think the only one that I can think of that was a double entendre in the PS3 era, Full Frontal Assault is kind
Yeah.
of there with Full Frontal, but the most on the nose one, it wasn't even for PS3, but it came out during that era. Size Matters on the PSP.
Oh, yeah. Well, that was a PS2 and PSP, yeah.
Yeah. But like it came out around the PS3 era, didn't it? Like post
Mhm.
2006, I think. I don't
Yeah,
know.
that was that bridging, like I said, it was a PS2 release, but it was really late in the game, and it was mostly for PSP is what they
Hmm.
marketed it for. But
I
I
like that
have played
game
that
too.
one. I like that one. Yeah, I
It's a
didn't have a
good
problem
one.
with it. I played it on PSP. I do have it on PS2, but I beat it
I
first
haven't
on
tried it on
PSP.
PS2. I beat it on PSP somewhat recently. I
Mhm.
also beat Secret Agent Clank is also really fun on PSP.
I got that one when I was a kid too, or a teenager probably at that point, and I remember being so frustrated with that game because I wanted it to be the other stuff and it wasn't. It was so
Hmm.
puzzle based, and that like once we left the PS2 era and we got to the PS3 era of Ratchet and Clank, I feel like it was more puzzle based than the PS2 era was. But that, maybe that's
I'd
just
have
me.
to see. I recently played Tools of Destruction, and it was still pretty action oriented.
It's been
Um,
a while since I've played the
but
PS3 era, but I just remember being like,
yeah.
I'd like to not use Clank every 5 minutes or something. It felt like, or
Okay,
and like
okay, I
not
could see
have to
that.
do a puzzle to get across the map or whatever it
I
is.
gotcha. I gotcha. Well, and this is Going Commando is the one that you really saw Clank kind of step into that role a little bit more, because there are Clank puzzles in this game where you get control these little robots. I forget what they're called exactly, but like
Oh,
microbots or something like that. I forget what they're.
yeah. I don't
But
remember.
there's like little ones that you can direct to either follow you, enter into doorways.
Nanobots? Is that it?
Nanobots. That might be it. That might have
That
been
might
it.
be it.
Or you can direct them to attack, but then you also have specialty ones that there's a hammer one and there's a bridge one, and they each kind of serve obviously different purposes. The bridge one builds a bridge for you to cross. The hammer one lets basically smashes things that are in your way. That's pretty much it. I will say they did do some interesting puzzles with these. I liked There's one where you have to basically have the bridge bot like build a bridge to nowhere, like it doesn't attach to anything, and then you have to run and jump off it and hover down to the platform below. So it was kind of sad because you leave this bridge bot guy just chilling up there by
Mm-hmm.
himself. Like you had to get over there somehow. So we've already talked about how like they added leveling up to the weapons. We've talked about how they kind of found their sense of humor a little bit with this, and we're going to kind of even dive into that as this episode goes on, because there is so much comedy in this game. Like I love all the jokes that they have. Like one of my favorites is just I don't know if this is a joke, but one of my favorite characters is like the hippie crystal dude on the desert planet, where he just does that stereotypical like like he's meditating, and then he
Crystals. I need crystals.
and then after he's like, the crystals guide your way, man, and all this other stuff. And then after you bring in 10 crystals so he can fix your ship, then he goes, if you bring me crystals, I'll bring you cold hard bolts. And it's
Yeah.
like, what?
Yeah.
and
Yeah. Like all of a sudden we've swapped over and then
he's
yeah.
like, I'm a capitalist now. I
Yeah.
went from this hippie guy who only cares about love and free will, and now he's like, give me your money, I'll buy you
I
crystals for bolts.
I feel like that guy who voiced it is a voice actor and I can't remember who else he does. But like it's like on the tip of my tongue of
Know what? You ever see the show Scrubs? This ties into this,
yeah,
I promise.
infrequently, but yes.
The actor who plays the janitor, Neil Flynn, plays Skid McMarks in the original game.
Skid is my dude. I love him. Oh, that's
I
funny. I didn't know that.
when I saw that, I was like, "What?" And I want to. I would adore to get Neil Flynn on the podcast somehow. I have no way of reaching him. I don't know if he has, like, a lot of voice actors usually have a website that you can reach out to, but he's been in the industry for so long now. He doesn't really.
Mhm.
I don't think he has his own website. I'm going to search that right now. See if Neil Flynn has a website. But he's in Ratchet and Clank, which I just find endlessly enjoyable. The closest thing I can find is that there's a lawyer named Neil Flynn
Oh no.
from the Illinois General Assembly. I don't think that's him, to say the least. Probably not.
Oh, okay, okay, here we go. I'm sorry. I was also looking. So the guy is called the Mystic. He doesn't really have a name. He's just called the Mystic.
Who
But
voices him?
James Arnold Taylor, the guy who
What?
voices Ratchet.
James Arnold Taylor, he's so good as Ratchet as well. I mean, besides doing Ratchet, he's been Obi-Wan Kenobi for a lot of the
Yep.
Star Wars cartoons for years. So he's been around. And
And he
I'm
was
still,
yeah, he was I was going to say it looks at like I was looking at all this stuff that he was on and they were saying what was it Titus in Final Fantasy X?
yeah,
Yeah, like
the
crazy.
notorious laughing line,
Yeah.
which
I
I still think it's a little more shit than it deserves. I don't think it deserves as much shit as it gets, personally.
yeah. I don't know. I'm not a huge Final Fantasy person, so I don't have the stake in this. I don't think. But
It's neither here nor there. I won't go into it then, but it gets shit that I don't think it gets more shit than I think it deserves. But
shit.
yeah, like the there's just so many moments in this game that just are really humorous, whether it's like uh Mr. Fizz widget, who, it's spoiler alert for the whole story, by the way. We're just going to get the spoiler alert out of the way now in case anyone cares for some reason. These games aren't known for their stories, especially the early ones. But you find out that Mr. Fizz widget is not actually Mr. Fizz widget. It's actually Captain Quark, who is impersonating Mr. Fizzwidget to basically create a threat that he can then stop so he can be a hero again. And that's the whole premise of this game, is you stopping this threat, though you don't realize that's what Quark's plan is. And the speaking cadence for Abercrombie Fizzwidget, which, what a great name, first of all, Abercrombie
Yeah,
Fizzwidget. But
absolutely.
the speaking cadence and like his words, he'll say, like, he makes up words 90% of the time. like make it like dupliferous or something like that. Like
Yeah.
I can't replicate his speech pattern. It is so strange, but I find that endlessly enjoying. And the fact that I would assume Jim Ward did the voice for it, because that's who's the voice of Captain Quark, but I don't know. I'm not entirely sure. I'll have to look that up. I did try to look up the dude who voices the Thugs for Less boss. I think that's one of my favorite.
Oh
Oh,
my
Steve
god.
Bloom. Steve Bloom is the voice of the Thugs for Less boss. Spike
And he's
Spiegel
like
himself.
and he's like very much like a Goodfellas like New York City crime boss knockoff character.
Yes.
It's funny. And then they have the whole Thugs for Less side plot, and then they're supposed to be these tough dudes, and then they end up just being like really goofy and just getting into really goofy stuff as the story progresses, like in the background basically. It'll just be like a little clip of them, I don't know, I can't even remember, but like they'll be doing something so stupid, and they're supposed to be like these big guys dressed in black with these menacing red eyes and stuff.
Well, they talk about how there is. Oh, Jim Ward does do the voice of Abercrombie Fizz, by the way. But so they talk about on the Thugs for Less boss. He'll talk about like throwing a pizza party. Whoever catches Ratchet
Yeah.
first gets a free pizza party, and it's all stuff that big companies do to incentivize their employees that no employee actually gives two shits about. It's like, we just want money. We don't care if you give us a pizza party.
Right.
You're saving us maybe $15. Um,
Right.
it's so goofy, but I love the idea that there's just, once again, lending itself to its humor. There's a company in this galaxy just called Thugs for Less, where you can just, it's just the idea that a mercenary group is called Thugs for Less is just the most amusing thing to me. I just love that idea. And the fact that they have like, company picnics. The
Yep.
thugs, the mercenaries have a company picnic.
Right. Right.
It's the idea of
And
these super mundane things with these badass guys is just so funny to me.
yeah, and he's like, everybody gets a pizza party. Like that's he's talking all tough about it too. The whole thing is just very silly.
It is. So a little bit of history on the game and some of the facts about its development. The game actually started development 5 months before the first game was ever released, because the play testers rated the original game so highly that they greenlit a sequel before the first game even came out, which is kind of a bold move if you think about it, because you don't know if this is going to be a hit. Because sometimes games will have a great gameplay and it just doesn't hit at the right time, i.e. Earthbound. Like there's certain things that just don't hit at the time they come out. And so they started development 5 months before the game was the first game, excuse me, was even out. They had a couple ideas that they were trying to like go with. They wanted, the first thing was RPG elements. That was kind of like something to get people's attention. But the other thing was spherical worlds. So, the planets that are just complete circles, and it's usually like you have to take out like towers or some type of radio transponders and stuff like that. The reason why they did that is they liked the idea of a player being able to jump like 100 meters in the air. But to do that in a normal level would completely break the level. You would go out of bounds. You'd be able to see things you're not supposed to see. So they can't do that on a normal level, but they could do that on a planet, on a perfectly spherical planet. It kind of is almost like proto Mario Galaxy in a sense, where it's
Mm-hmm.
just the like Ratchet is sticking to this planet, this small planet's gravity, and it, by doing this though, it created so many issues for them in development. They talk about how it took 50,000 lines of code per planet just to get it to work, because that also involved the physics of like when you shoot your weapon or you throw your wrench on this bizarrely curved planet, how will it shoot? Like, just coding it so it stays with the arc of the planet was super difficult. And if you have the 100-meter jump like they want to in this, then it doesn't make a difference when the planet is just a perfect sphere, because you're constantly going to keep with the rotation, or you're going to be perpendicular with the surface of the planet strange as that sounds, considering it's a sphere. So it was super difficult for them to do that, but it was something they wanted to do, and they weren't my favorite elements of the game. What about you? Did you enjoy the spherical planets?
I always felt they were like kind of difficult to maneuver. Also, because like when I play games, I'm a person that goes to every nook and cranny. So it's hard to do that on those. So I always kind of like felt like I was running over the same locations, even though I wasn't, because also they all look very similar. But I don't feel like it was like, I know it was used, but like I didn't feel like it was overused. It was just like, all right, I'm done with this. I got what I needed. Let's get out of here, kind of thing, as quick as I could.
I had a kind of a similar reaction to it. They weren't never my favorite, specifically the planets where you had to fight the Thugs for Less boss as a
Yeah.
giant supersized Clank. I
Yeah, I
never
didn't like
really
that.
enjoyed those fights because the boss took so long to take out. I finally found like a good way to do it is like if you can stun lock him a little bit with the missiles and then jump into the air, and when if you land on him like with a stomping
Yeah.
motion, it does a lot of damage, but that still takes a long time to take him out. It was kind of obnoxious to do.
Yeah.
um yeah, I'm with you. I wasn't a big fan of the spherical planets, which is a shame because they clearly put a lot of effort into them, and I can understand from a technical perspective why it was so amazing that they were able to do this, especially considering they released this game in less than a year after, like only a year after the original one came out. So it's kind of nuts. One of the things that they added to this game as well was the interactivity and compatibility between the save files between Ratchet and Clank 1 and 2. And that's something I love that they've done ever since. If you have a save file for a previous game, it gives you a little like, hey, thank you for playing our first game. Here's some weapons or here's some items in this game. And I always love that they did that. On my recent replay through of it, because my old PS3 bricked, I actually have it over there. I can't access the hard drive at all anymore. So all my save files are gone. So it doesn't recognize that I've already played this game before or played the original beforehand. It's a tie back to something we said before, how Quark is the main villain. It kind of surprises you at the end. It kind of makes a lot more sense to me with this knowledge coming in that I'm about to say. Quark was a late addition to the game, which kind of feels right. Like for based on how much he's actually in it. What do you think? Did you feel like Quark was kind of like thrown in there?
Um, yeah, but it also felt like it didn't feel like thrown in. It felt like almost an intentional plot twist, but it was saved for the end because you were playing this game and then you didn't know what was going to happen, and then boom, at the end you're like, what? But then that sets it up too for like the rest of the series where he's always tied in somehow. You know what I mean? Like there's always something with him, with some scheme or eventually not being as bad of a person. A little redemption. Spoiler.
It's actually kind of, I've said it before on the last episode. It's actually kind of a bummer what happened. So Jim Ward's the voice actor for Captain Quark. He's no longer the voice actor because he's retired because he's suffering from dementia, like early onset dementia, which
That
is
sucks.
such a bummer. Now, you're a 90s kid, Kelly, right?
Yeah.
You like the Mighty Ducks?
Yeah.
This ties in with Ratchet and Clank, believe it or not. Would you believe the new voice of Captain Quark? His name is Scott White. Scott White is Gunnar Stahl, the captain of Team Iceland in D2 The Mighty Ducks. He's also, which I did not know this because he looks completely different, the goalie of the varsity team in D3 The Mighty Ducks.
Hmm.
He's Scooter. They look nothing alike. I had no idea until like I found him on Instagram and he shared the two pictures. I'm like, there's no fucking way you're the same person. And you
Wow.
look at the credits, it's the same guy. He's actually been a voice actor now for a number of years, and he is the new voice of Captain Quark in A Rift Apart. So
Cool.
that blew my mind that Gunnar Stahl is Captain Quark. There's a direct line of Mighty Ducks to Captain Quark. How about that?
That pipeline is I didn't think would exist, and now it does. That's crazy.
Now I just want to go. I I never got to do this, but I almost got the dude who played Averman on the podcast. The actor who played Lester Averman from the Mighty Ducks movies. I almost got him on the podcast, and my logic was, even though I'm a video game podcast, there is one Mighty Ducks video game. It's based off the cartoon, and it's a Tiger Electronics handheld. But
Yeah,
I'm like, that's gotta count, right? To get
it
the
counts.
live action Duck Hunt.
It
Uh,
counts.
he politely said no. And I was like, fair enough, fair enough. So I couldn't find any others, but there we go. Oh my god, I still can't believe that Gunnar Stahl is the new voice of Captain Quark. It's just nuts for me. But no, so Quark was a late addition to this, and they the way they kind of made it feel like it wasn't totally out of left field is they added those behind the
Hmm.
hero vignettes that they would do, so they would kind of show the downfall of Captain Quark, so that way you're kind of thinking about him throughout the game. You're like, hey, remember this guy from the last game? And then when it finally comes out that it's Fizzwidget is him, or he's impersonating Fizzwidget, it doesn't feel as much of a shock, but it kind of makes sense, because to me it always felt kind of shoehorned in, but not in necessarily a bad way. It felt, it was weird that he was the villain in my eyes, because he was like kind of the villain last time, kind of not, like he was just more of a henchman. And so it was weird to see him be the mastermind, quote unquote, of this entire thing. And like we said in the beginning, the whole reason that he wants to do this is so that way he can create a threat that's big enough. And it's the threat that he creates through his company called Megacorp, which I didn't even really talk about the setting. This game takes place in a completely different galaxy than in the original one. I think I forget the name of the galaxy of the first game. Do you remember what it is by any chance?
Uh
Solanus? I think it's the Solanus galaxy.
you might be right. I don't remember the name of either galaxy. I
Well,
barely
it's the
remember the planet names. I know what they
uh
look like, but I don't remember their names.
it's I believe it's the Solana galaxy. I was right. Wow, that was a good
Good,
guess there.
good
Uh
pull.
I mean, I said Solanus, but I'm surprised how close I
Close.
was. Um it's the Bogon galaxy, is it, where this game is. And the whole reason that Ratchet and Clank are over there is because after saving the planet, saving the universe, saving the galaxy, they were bored. No one else was like reaching out for help or anything like that. So that's why it was kind of strange when they get a call from Abercrombie Fizzwidget saying like, we've got our man. It's like, if you were Quark the whole time, what, like, you don't need to say that, you just do it. I don't know, that's why it kind of felt a little shoehorned in at the end, because like the beginning, unless Quark takes over Abercrombie Fizzwidget's body, like in between that scene and later on, but I don't know. um so they go to this new galaxy so that way Ratchet can be trained as a commando, and Clank, I forget what his whole thing is, but they end up trying to get this proto pet back from a scientist who stole it from the Megacorp laboratory. Gadgetron is the big tech company over in the Solana galaxy. Megacorp is the big tech company over here in the Bogon galaxy. And the scientist steals it from there because you don't know why at the time. And you find out later it's because the protopet is an evil. It's basically like a gremlins, pretty much. But
Yeah,
you never have to get it wet. It's always evil.
yeah.
It's just always angry. And so you steal it from this actually they credit it in Ratchet 2 as a female Lombax, but they make it a point in the later games that Ratchet has never met another Lombax.
Well, that was the hugest thing. Okay, now this is going into a Rift Apart, but when they pull up in a Rift Apart, the um, other character, and I forget her name, is a female Lombax. And then they were like, wow, look, Ratchet met a female Lombax. And then everybody's like, well, what the heck was Angela? Like,
Yeah, well, it's so confusing because she's not, like, don't they make it a point in the later games where Ratchet's so distraught that he doesn't have any connection to his race,
People.
his people,
Yeah.
and they make that a big point of a crack in
A
time,
crack in time, right? Because it wasn't his father or his
or someone who worked for his dad or
grandfather
something
or
like that.
something
Yeah.
like that. Yeah, it was like some elder Lombax, and I don't remember his
Hmm.
name either. But yeah, and that was like the only one you were like supposed to have seen, and it's like, well, we saw Angela, and she's the same as he is.
Hmm.
And I don't know why. Like, so there was a lot of. I know when A Rift Apart especially came out, and they were like, "Look, a female Lombax," and everybody's like, what do you mean the first female Lombax? Like, why is this? Like, why are you erasing Angela from
That
the canon of Ratchet and Clank?
that's so, it's just so strange. Like I was so confused by that too. It just, I don't know. I guess, I mean, Ratchet really, I guess, isn't really known for uh major Ratchet and Clank series isn't really known for its story all that well. So I guess they don't really care that much about retconning stuff, because they did retcon a little bit of the first game with the remake, which I actually, and this actually is a good segue into one of the other things they wanted to do, the devs wanted to do with this. They wanted to make Ratchet nicer to Clank, because they watched a lot of the cutscenes from the first game, and they thought that Ratchet was kind of a tool to Clank, and he was to a
He
degree.
was.
But I think one thing that, like, Tristan and I talked about this on the original episode, they made Ratchet too nice in the remake. Like, the whole big falling out between him and Clank that has to happen doesn't feel very warranted in the remake. In the first one, you believe it because Ratchet's trying to tell Clank, like, Captain, like, this is, this, what you're trying to go for is not right. Like, you're being misled, you're being manipulated, and Clank doesn't want to hear it, and so he keeps going along with it because he's trusting Clank. And then because he trusts Clank, he ends up getting, because he trusts Clank, bad things happen. They get betrayed, and so that's why they go separate ways, because he's pissed off, because he kept trying to tell Clank and Clank wouldn't listen. And I forget what the logic was in the remake, but I think one of them thought was dead. I don't remember. It didn't hit as hard. Um, and so I kind of like, though, in the first game, though, that they didn't like each other all that much at first, because they just met each other, of course, and they're going through something traumatic. So of course he's not going to be the nicest to him in the moment. But I like that they decided to be like, well, now that they've had this experience together, let's make him a little bit nicer. And you kind of feel that camaraderie that Ratchet and Clank have with each other in this game.
Yeah, because in the beginning, like when you see them, like when the screen opens, like before in the first game, when the screen opens is one of my favorite, but it's just the him in his garage, Ratchet in the garage working on a ship under a night sky, and they're just kind of hanging out and doing their thing, and you just hear him like wrenching away. And then in Going Commando, when you open up to the screen, it's them sitting on the couch together playing a video game, which they're playing Ratchet and Clank 1, or they're playing Jack and Dexter, which is also pretty funny that like they always tie in Jack and Dexter to these games because they're so super similar, but I don't know. People just have a same memory of Jack and Dexter and Ratchet and Clank. And I
I
just
mean,
think
well,
it's funny.
Ratchet and Clank and Jack and Daxter, since Naughty Dog did Jack and Daxter, obviously Insomniac did Ratchet and Clank. Which, now I even think about it, we didn't even mention what date this game was released on. November 11th, 2003. We're only 50 minutes into the episode, but
Yeah,
that's fine.
that's the
Uh,
time frame.
uh, but Naughty Dog and Insomniac shared a game studio, like a physical space,
Oh,
for a
okay, that
number of
makes more
years.
sense.
So that's why they work so closely. And that's why, if you look in Going Commando, you can see a picture of Jack and Daxter in
The
Ratchet's
apartment.
apartment in the one
Hmm.
planet. And then if you play Jack 2, you'll see pictures of Ratchet and Clank up in New Haven City. And even in the, what is it? I think it might be in the first game. When you grab like a gold bolt or something like that on the one planet, Clank and Ratchet do the Jack and Daxter dance of when they collect a power cell from the first Jack and Daxter game. So they shared a lot of assets in it, and the sharing went all the way up until Ratchet Deadlocked and the Jack X Combat Racing. But anyway, they really seem to have that sense of friendship in this game a lot more. Like they really try to root each other on. And especially as the series goes on, especially in the PS3 games, that relationship really kind of solidifies. And I really enjoy that. So the voice actress for this scientist that I mentioned before, the Angela, is the scientist that steals the protopet, the gremlin like protopet. It feels very much ripped off of Gremlins, the idea of the protopet. I'm not gonna lie. But she steals the protopet because Quark wants to unleash, like, sell it as a product, so that way it's going to go haywire. He's not actually part of Megacorp. He's impersonating Megacorp CEO. So when Megacorp goes down, it won't even matter, and he can just save the galaxy again. Angela kind of gets the idea of, kind of gets a hint of what's going on and determines she can't let it happen, steals the protopet. The voice actress for Angela is a voice actress named Katie Soucie. And Katie Soucie, holy shit, she's been in everything. She was Phil, Lil, and Betty in the Rugrats.
Wow.
Right? I'm like, now that I look at her like credits, I'm just looking for, okay, how can I get her on the podcast? I need to
I
find a
can
way.
I can hear that in her voice though. If you think about it, you can kind of hear Phil and Lil a little bit.
I'm trying to
I
get
don't.
to her IMDb page, but it's taking forever to load. Yeah, she plays Phil, Lil. Uh, she is Hubert Farnsworth in Futurama.
Oh my gosh,
Wow. I mean,
she's doing everything.
she's in the new Rugrats one. She's been in Young Justice. She's been in Curious George. I mean, she's a voice actress, so she's been, she has tons and tons of roles. It's insane how many roles she has. Let's see what the earliest role that she has, and it takes a while to get down. 1979, she was in a TV movie called The Incredible Journey of Dr. Meg Laurel.
Wow, she's been
uh,
working.
yeah, in terms of voice acting, it seems like she was in. She did additional voices in the Alvin and the Chipmunks TV series. That's what it's kind of looking like. But then
Hmm.
ever since then, she's done a lot. Like she was in a pup named Scooby Doo.
Mm.
Then obviously she was Kiki's mother in Kiki's Delivery Service.
Wow.
Wow. Sorry, listeners. This is a whole
Mhm.
down the rabbit hole. But I will. This is the last credit I'll read, just because I've never heard of this, and I am very curious. The Adventures of Don Coyote and Sancho Panda. And it looks like a Hanna-Barbera style cartoon, and it's clearly ripping off Don Quixote,
Mhm.
but it's Don Coyote. But Frank Welker's in it too. Man, they went
Wow.
all out for this. I'm very curious about this. Tim Curry's in this too. What the fuck?
Wow.
All right. Sorry, this is it's so easy to go down voice actor rabbit holes with this.
Very easy.
But yeah, so Angela doesn't want this to get out, so she's trying to escape. Ratchet takes it back from her, not realizing that she's actually trying to do the right thing. And then that's pretty much when everything goes south, because the Thugs for Less people that she had initially hired to help protect her and the Protopet are now bought out by Fizzwidget and Fizzwidget / Quark. And so now Ratchet has to fight through all of Fizzwidget's thugs and the Thugs for Less guys to get to them and get the Protopet back and stop them. And the final boss isn't even Captain Quark, because you have because Captain Quark's kind of able to do what he wants. You end up fighting a giant protopet, which vomits out lots of smaller protopets, and it's kind of mortifying. But before we talk about kind of like the boss itself, what Kelly, what are some of your favorite bosses? Or let's kind of do this to get into the gameplay. What are some of your favorite planets that you got to explore in this?
So I was trying to figure out what some of them were called. But the one that was like basically like the city, I can't remember. I'm trying to find it and I can't find it. Or maybe I already went over it and it's not showing it in these screenshots. But it was like you roll up and you are like, there's a bridge and there was like a city around you. And I can't remember. I thought it was
It could
pretty
be
early.
Bolden. It was a highly populated planet with yellow skies, home to Silver City.
That might be it. Bolden.
Contains a large clock tower and an underground tunnel for aircraft travel.
Bolden. Let's see. Um, that might be it. I don't remember. I just remember like you walked out and you were like in this cityscape basically, and I was like, this is cool. Like that was like my favorite part of the game. Um I also liked I think it was like the one where you were at like the factory. I like the factory one. That was the
Oh wait, I think I know what you're
Togano.
thinking. You're thinking of NOTAC.
Yes, that might
NOTAC.
be it. Yes.
NOTAK.
Yeah,
Canal
yeah.
City. I know exactly the cityscape you're talking about. That's
Yeah.
Canal City. Yes,
Yes. Canal
I
City. Yeah.
see. I love the visuals of that. When I was younger, I hated that level because it was so difficult for me for some
Hmm.
reason. I don't know why. For me, I really like Tadano, the Megacorp Armory, it's where you get the Sheepinator and it's got the big dam and there's
Yeah, that's
mutant
what I was.
squirrels.
That was what I was
That's
saying. The other
yeah,
one
yeah, yeah.
was. Yeah, that was
Uh,
a good one.
that level is wild. It's also a good level to get bolts once you get the box breaker, and it just
Hmm.
lets you, for the so listeners, the box breaker in the Ratchet and Clank series is you can just jump up and do a slam attack with your wrench, and it sends out a shockwave and it breaks boxes and anything else that's breakable within a certain radius of where you did it, and it gets you a lot of bolts really fast. Now, generally, when you first use it, like the first time you get to a planet, that's when it gives you the most amount of bolts from each of the boxes and from each of the breakable objects. So it's useful because if you want to collect bolts and like farm for bolts, you pretty much just go to a handful of planets, land, do a couple of those smashes, and you maybe get a couple thousand bolts, and then you fly to another planet and do it all over again. It's a little frustrating because especially some of the weapons at the end, like we talked a little bit about the weapons, but you get some crazy weapons at the end, like the Rhino, which for those who don't
Hmm.
know stands for rip ya a new one. I always love how the dude says it in the first game, like the
Yep.
black market dealer's like rip ya a new one.
Yeah, and he's got a big old trench coat on.
Hmm. But if
Classic.
you get the Rhino 2, which is in this game, it is such a great weapon. Holy shit. It makes the final boss a joke. It is laughably easy to beat the final boss if you get the Rhino 2, but I believe it costs it costs 1,000,000 bolts to
Yeah.
buy. It's crazy. And it's just, oh my gosh, it costs so much money to get and it takes so long. So I remember when I was playing this, I didn't want to waste time trying to farm for bolts. So I looked up what's the best way to farm bolts in each game. In the original game, you know how there's the hoverboard races?
Hmm.
The hoverboard races on the planet that they're on, I forget the name of the planet, they spawn at the same time the rest of the planet does. They just exist in somewhere else. So, like, if you essentially what you do is you glitch it so you get out of bounds and then you fall off the side of the level, and underneath the level is the racetrack. So you stand on the racetrack with the taunter and the boxes automatically refresh because it's on the rate. It still thinks you're like, because that's what it's set to do during the race. They automatically respawn. So
Hmm.
you stand below the boxes with the taunter, which breaks all the boxes automatically, and you just press and hold the taunter. So it constantly breaks boxes above you, and you just collect bolts. So what I did was I taped the button down and I just walked away. And that's how I was able to get enough bolts for the original Rhino, which I think was only like 100,000, but like
Yeah.
100,000 in the original Ratchet and Clank might have well been 1,000,000.
I will share my secret, and this was so when this game first came out back in the day and you're too poor to get a strategy guide, you go and you print out your cheats on the internet and tuck them in your game case, or you write them down on paper and tuck it in your game case. Um, but that was all you had. You didn't have like go to YouTube or IGN walkthroughs or anything. So I
Hmm.
found when I was a kid, if you are in Metropolis on the first game and you're at your ship, like if you turn around and face, like if you've done the level before you, there's a taxi right behind you. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
So instead of jumping on the taxi, hover down and you'll see an opening below, and it's like an under, like a pass through underneath where these ships are flying, like because it's supposed to be the traffic for the city. And down
Yeah.
there is a gold bolt, but you could also stand there and it's just far enough away that you can just flip your wrench back and forth, and I think you get like 5 to 10 bolts a ship, but you can just keep pressing that for as long as you want, and you're getting free bolts from hitting a ship with your wrench.
Oh, that still would
So
have taken a long time.
it did, but that was what I found as a kid as a way to farm bolts back when there wasn't a way to know how to farm bolts. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that was like my trick that I still like to sometimes do. But it was also fun because you would, I don't know, you'd just like try to hit them all or see as many
Hmm.
as you could hit as many as you can before you missed one or whatever. But yeah, it takes a little bit longer than yours, but
Yeah, well, I cheated. I'm not going to count that. Like, I looked it up online and I cheated. You figured out a way as a kid. That's more impressive in my book. I don't know what I did for this one. I might have just tried to beat the boss the first time without it, and then on the new game plus, because this game, like the first Ratchet and Clank game, has new game plus, and it kind of allows you to upgrade weapons. In that first game, you get gold weapons if you get enough of the gold bolts. Well, since this is the sequel, it's got to be better, so you have platinum bolts. But you don't need the platinum bolts necessarily to upgrade the weapons like you do in the first one. You can use them, like that's what they're used for. They are for weapon upgrades, but you still get other upgrades even without the platinum bolts, which is what's kind of nice. So like you can upgrade your weapon and then you can upgrade it again, sort of. You'll level up your weapon and then you can upgrade it. But I genuinely don't remember what I did to save up enough bolts for the Rhino 2. I think they did do nice about the new game plus for this, to bring it back to that. And the reason I brought it up in the first place is that on the new game plus you get a bolt multiplier. So
mhm.
you can, by using that, if you don't get hit, you can have like a times 9 bolts or something like that, so you can just get obscene amounts of bolts right off the bat. The only reason I think it's kind of worth buying the Rhino 2 for the final boss is that it makes the final boss laughably easy. It is insane. It's just, it's comical how easy the final boss is with the Rhino 2. Everything else, it's a huge fight. It's a tough boss fight, if I remember correctly. Do you remember
I
was the boss tough for you?
so I was thinking about that. I remember playing it as a younger person, or times before that, and being like, oh, it's going to take forever, it's going to be tough. And I feel like the time I beat it most recently, which would have been by like probably by last year by now, I feel like it didn't take me that long, and I didn't have the Rhino. So I
I
don't I
hmm.
don't know what but I like, I understand like each, like it's just like annoying, but I felt like it wasn't tough. I just thought it was like, it was just like an annoying amount of time I had to keep doing it, but I didn't feel like it was a difficult battle, if that makes sense.
I remember being super difficult for some reason. Easier than I think Chairman Drek was in the first
Mhm.
game. Doctor Nefarious in the third game, I remember being super tough for me. That final boss was really hard.
Mhm.
Um, but anyway, for me, it just was really difficult. But I do like in Ratchet where the bosses are kind of a little bit. They're not, they're not all just bullet sponges, which I kind of like. Like there are a handful that are just bullet sponges, but they, like, I like that a lot of the bosses were kind of almost optional, because one, I can't believe we haven't talked about this yet. One of the biggest additions to this was the addition of the arenas, the arena
Mhm.
combat, and the challenges. So you would actually get to play these. They would give you, they throw these different challenges at you, and they're kind of segmented out, and it was kind of nice because the arena challenges allowed you to focus on just the combat. There was little to no platforming. It was almost all combat. And so it forced you to try out different weapons. They would do different things like, beat this challenge with only the heavy lancer, beat this challenge with only the wrench. There's a couple others where it would randomly cycle through all the different weapons. So you'd have to basically improvise every time and hope that you don't die. But then they had to have these bosses like the chain blade, and I don't remember there's two
The brain,
arenas.
brain.
Yeah,
It was
it's
brain.
yes, it was a brain and a robot body, but I can't
Yeah.
remember the name of it. But the chain blade was the first one, and then that brain and robot body was the second one, and then they had two more bosses added to the second arena over. I think that's there was the casino resort that had the first set of games, which isn't surprising that they would have that at
Mhm.
a casino. And then they would have the Megacorp games, which was the second set. And obviously, the Megacorp games was a lot more difficult than the first arena because it's later on in the game. But you get a lot of different. You always had to complete at least one challenge in them because it would give you some type of item, usually a gadget like the electrolyzer or the I forget the name of the other thing. There's the electrolyzer, and then I forget what the name of the other. Uh, oh, it's going to drive me nuts. The name of the other like puzzle solver thing. You know what I'm talking about?
Um, the hacker was the one in the first game. Anyway, the guy, the brain guy is the B2 brawler.
That's what it is. Thank you. I could not remember the
I
name
was
of it.
I was looking it up as you were saying it, but the let's see.
It is. I will find it in a second. It is the come on, internet, don't do this to me now.
Infiltrator.
Infiltrator, thank you. That's weird that it's not in.
Okay, it was trespasser in the first game. Hacker maybe was in the third game or something. I
Okay,
don't remember, but yes, it's the infiltrator on this one as well.
and we haven't even talked about that. Just kind of makes me think about the gadgets. There's a lot of great gadgets in this game.
Mm-hmm.
The tractor beam, the helipad, or sorry, not the helipack. That's built in. The tractor beam, the dynamo, the Terminator. I really like all the puzzles with those. The Terminator was fun because you would have to time. Basically, the Terminator lets you freeze and unfreeze water, so you
Yeah,
would
that's
have
cool.
to time when to freeze a body of water, so that way you could traverse it because it would go up and down. So if there was a pipe in the middle of something, you would have to freeze it midway up the pipe, so it was still just enough space for you to walk through the pipe, but still not too low that you couldn't jump up to the platform that's on the other side. What are some of your favorite gadgets though?
I was gonna say that. I mean, those are all really good ones. I was also gonna say, um, this is the first game where they had armor. You could have armor
Oh
for
yeah,
Ratchet,
yeah, yeah.
and you could buy. So that was like a really big deal too, because then it would decrease your damage, and then you could upgrade your armor as you go along. Because the first game there was no armor at all, and then this kind of introduced the like upgradable armor situation for Ratchet, and that was really cool because that also helps you with your health as you go along. But I liked that. That made it a little easier to keep going. But the dynamo was cool. It always
Mm-hmm.
pissed me off, but it was a really cool like because if you mess up one thing, then you just gotta go all the way back to the beginning because all of your stuff disappears. But it was like holograms in platforms and stuff that would move around.
Mm-hmm.
So you would have to like do that to like complete essentially like almost like a platforming puzzle part of the level to get through it. But that was always cool because it took a different form depending on where you were and what the like what the access point was.
Yeah.
Or like the platforms would move in like different directions. It was never the same.
This is just thinking of like a platforming puzzle segment. This isn't a gadget, but just the dynamo for some reason got me thinking of it. There's these platforms that they would almost like Mega Man style. They would appear and disappear,
Mm-hmm.
and the ones that would always throw me off, it would be like flat, 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 and then there'd be one you would have to wall jump off and land on another flat one, and you would always like because it'd be flat, 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 and suddenly it'd be sideways, and it would always, because you're not expecting it, so it would just freak you out, and then you would panic and then do the wrong jump and fall off. Thankfully, not to your death, but you'd still fall,
Yeah.
and then it was just frustrating to deal with. Something else we haven't even discussed, like this is just keeps we keep adding stuff to this, because once again, we said this before, this game added so much to the Ratchet and Clank series. You have upgradable weapons, you have the arena games, you have all these new types of gadgets. The dynamo is such an awesome gadget that you only see in this game, which I always thought was kind of strange, because I thought the dynamo was really cool. But then you also have the space combat, like the ship combat,
Mm,
the very Star Fox-esque combat segments, and you can upgrade your ship. If you collect
yeah.
enough raritanium, you can add better blasters, you can change how your ship looks, you can upgrade your rockets, you can upgrade your thrusters, like you can do all these things. And so not only can you level up, like there's RPG elements added to the guns and to Ratchet himself, there's also a bit of like a flight, not a flight simulator, but like a shmup element to it, a 3D shmup, but like a 3D shmup element to it with this like ship battle mechanic. And it's just insane how many different things they crammed into this game and somehow made it feel like coherent, between the arenas, between I mean, this was in the first game, but like the hover bike races,
Yeah.
it was hoverboard in the first one, but same diff essentially. Hover bike arenas. You have the space combat. You have the giant Clank combat sections where you're doing like, it's like a beat 'em up, not a beat 'em. It's like a fighting game. You're
Yeah.
duking it out with one on one. Well, you have other enemies you have to take out, but you have this main boss, that guy that you have to fight. Like they added so much to this, and it almost feels a little bit like um no, this is a really weird, I don't know why this reminds me of it, because they do this a lot better than old games used to. You know how games on the NES would try to include multiple different gameplay styles on? I'm thinking of things like Adventures of Bayou Billy, where you'd have
Hmm.
like a side-scrolling beat 'em up, and then a driving segment, and then a shooting
Yeah.
segment.
Yeah.
It feels kind of like that, but actually done well and actually
No,
coherent.
you're right. I mean, it truly did bring a lot of that stuff together. I always hated the ship parts. I'm not a good flight simulator person, so anytime I'm playing a game that has that segment, I'm also looking at you, Kingdom Hearts, and your gummy ship. I It's the same thing, just different fonts. The gummy ship and Ratchet and Clank's ship building fighting segments. It's the same thing, just a different game.
I
But
would
I hated that.
argue, I would argue Kingdom Hearts is worse, because their gummy ship thing is confusing as hell. I don't
Yeah.
understand how you upgrade your gummy ship. I genuinely don't. I guess you're supposed to be able to build your own ship, but it's never really well explained, and it's such a minor part, because you get the fast travel like relatively early on. So it's just silly to me. Or you don't
I'll
get it
leave it.
early on, but
I was gonna say I'll leave it at this with the Kingdom Hearts. Is I love Kingdom Hearts, but they never explain anything. The whole game is just a giant question mark. You can be a fan and have no idea what's going on. So
I,
that's
I've
all
said
that is.
I've said this before. I'm not going to take credit for this joke, but I've repeated this joke on a number of episodes. If you ever want to tell someone, tell someone who's never played a Kingdom Hearts game, and just help them understand how confusing the timeline is without having to go into all the details, you just say this: Kingdom Hearts 3 is the ninth game in the series.
Yes, that's it.
Simple as that. It may be 10th.
Yeah,
I don't really remember which number it is, but you get the idea. It's like it's like the ninth game of the series. It's fucking wild.
yeah.
Um, we've been kind of jumping all over the place, so I think what we should move on to is just quick talk about. I have one fun fact that I forgot to mention earlier about the spherical worlds, and then I think we should talk about what our thoughts about the visual aesthetics, like the overall art direction of the game, and we can kind of tie the music in with that as well. But the fun fact I wanted to say that I forgot to bring up before was that the spherical worlds, that they, once again, a tech marvel for the time, they were inspired by the cover of the book The Little Prince back when they were developing it.
Uh,
And
that's cool.
right, it's kind of a fun little. Now I've never seen the cover of The Little Prince. Apparently, you have though.
It is an extremely, if I'm remembering correctly, I
Oh,
saw
I'm
it.
looking at it right
I
now.
saw it in I think it was high school. Um, it was like an integral part of my foreign language class. I did not take this language, but it's a big book in France. So like people who take French are one of the first books that they read is The Little Prince. And
Hmm.
I took German, and my German teacher also spoke French very heavily. So
Oh,
she
okay.
kind of like showed this book to everybody. And I don't remember if we read it in German or if she was just like, this is a big deal or whatever. But I remember being introduced to it's obviously a children's book.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but I remember being introduced to it via foreign language class.
They made a CG movie. I don't know how closely based off of the book, but it's at least based off the book somewhat recently. And I remember my wife and I watched it and we really liked it. I don't, it was sad though. It was really sad, but it was good.
Yeah, it's not like a happy go lucky, everybody goes home and has a wonderful time. We're all just frolicking in the fields kind of story, but it's like a good kid story that's like realistic, but also like kind of fantastic, if you will.
Whimsical, if you will.
And that's it. Yeah,
There we go.
absolutely.
Whimsical. Whimsy. Uh,
Absolutely.
so let's talk about the overall visual aesthetics of this game. I don't know of any other game that kind of looks the way this series does. And I mean that as a compliment. I really feel like the first game kind of had it, but like it's like this heightened reality of like tech and nature and like things are overgrown with each other. And it's so cartoonish, but it works really well. I don't know. I said this on a different episode, but I always struggle with trying to find ways to describe the art and music other than be like, this sounds good to me. I like how pretty it is. Colors are grand. And that's about all I can really get out. But what are your thoughts on this at least? Like I tried to kind of get mine out there, but I'm having a hard time describing things.
So I remember when I played this game first in my life, in the time of there weren't a lot of electronics when you're a kid. So I spent a lot of time drawing and like sketching things that I liked or that I thought were like cool. And I
Oh,
remember
that's awesome.
this was a lot of it. Like I remember trying to take what they made and put it into my own drawing. Like I was trying not like I was drawing Ratchet and Clank, but I wanted to make my own picture with my own characters, but I wanted it to be that feeling of this 3D kind of um, fantasy animal slash humanoid kind of hybrid with
Yeah, yeah.
weaponry, and they're in this nature, but also there's a city or robots or something, and there's enemies. So I remember that like playing heavily, and then so it wasn't even just that was doing it, but I felt like it was also like this time period 2003 was like this like 3D generated cartoons were making like
Mm-hmm.
like I remember Tack was a big
Jimmy
thing on
Neutron.
Nick, Jimmy Neutron, that kind of stuff, and even Jack and Daxter was a very similar art style or style of game, it felt like. So those were almost like a sister game,
Mm-hmm.
but and he was like this kind of humanoid fantasy character with a little partner that had weapons and everything. And so it was like that was an aesthetic of like 2003 to like 2005. It was very like niche,
Yeah, yeah.
but they were like the name brand of it though. Like the Insomniac did such a good job of creating this whole entire galaxy and then doing it again, but keeping it different. I said earlier there was Metropolis in um, Ratchet and Clank 1, which is just a
Mm-hmm.
giant city. And then we were talking about how again, a favorite level in going Commando was the city. So there's always like these repetitive feeling levels. Like you're always going to have an ice planet. And you're always going to have a lava planet, and you're always going to have a jungle level, and then there's always like a toxic, smog level or
Hmm.
something. And they happen in the first two games for sure. I think there's probably a bunch of them also in the rest of the games, but they did it different every single time. So it didn't feel like, oh, well, I'm just on Metropolis, but different slightly. It was like a whole different layout. There were different enemies, different cars, different vibes. Like
Hmm.
Metropolis was in the day, and then this one was in the night. Like, I don't
Even
know. It
something
was,
as simple as that. I know that sounds simple, but
yeah.
it does make a big difference if you just to make a distinction between the two galaxies. No, 100%.
Yeah, so I think they did a lot of the same things and just switched it slightly to make it noticeably different. But again, it felt a lot like the first one in a good way, but that they just changed it to make it like way cooler in the second one, as far as like levels and the art and everything.
You're talking about the ice and desert planets as well, and that's just another thing they added to this. Not the idea of the ice and desert planets, but in every planet, it kind of they create a series of challenges. Like Ratchet and Clank game design has always been very interesting because Ratchet and Clank game design, they design a purpose and they design the space around that purpose. So they determine what they want to do with each planet and then they design the planet around that. Generally, Jack and Daxter was kind of like the opposite. They would design the space and then try to fill that space with a purpose. So Ratchet and Clank was a lot more like purposeful because they were going with the overall design first. And in the desert and snow planets, their general purpose of that, instead of having you giving you platforming challenges or puzzle challenges or combat challenges, it was more. I mean, these planets were definitely more combat focused, but there are these giant, expansive lands. As far like so far, like they're huge, huge spaces and filled with enemies and crystals, usually some type of a collectible, and then you could use those collectibles like I mentioned before about the mystic who wanted to get the crystals for cold hard bolts. You can use them to trade them in for crystals, and that's usually a real easy way to get a lot of money really quick because the first one, I think, like there's two planets that do this, and I believe it's like 1,000 bolts per crystal for the first planet, and maybe 2,000 for per crystal on the second planet. And it's not like there's only 10. It's like there is, 60,
100.
70, like 100 on each planet. So you can get a lot of bolts from these, and it's kind of amazing. So it's a good way to make money pretty quickly. I usually suggest waiting until you get the mapomatic or whatever it is, the equivalent of finding all the hidden secrets, so that way you don't have to spend hours going combing through the desert or the combing through the frozen tundra trying to find it. But they did, this is one of the ideas that they introduced in Ratchet and Clank Going Commando, and I actually think they kind of came to a logic, like a more unique, a more creative difference. Like they changed it more creatively as the series went on. A lot of times with the weapons in this one, yes, you can upgrade it with RPG elements, but in later games it's just like, all right, this weapon has 5 levels now, so it's not, and we do incremental changes. So while it is cool, it's not necessarily like this groundbreaking new idea. Like the RPG elements was a groundbreaking new idea for the series in this game because it was the first one to do it. But ever since then, they've pretty much always done it. What they've done with kind of these large expanses in the later games with a lot of collectibles is they still have them, but now they make it the platforming something unique that you can only do it on that planet. In the newer games, they usually have like a jetpack that you can only use on that planet, and you can fly around and explore and like really just kind of enjoy that planet much more so, because in this one, like you pretty much just have to walk. You may get the boost boots or whatever they're called, the charge boots,
Charge boots, yeah.
the charge boots, yeah, and it lets you shoot across the desert. But it's not really accurate. You can go really fast, but it's very hard to direct where you're going, and they slow down after if you use them for after a while. So in the newer games, they really expanded on this. So they completely changed the way you move. So not only is the planet itself different in terms of what its intention is compared to the rest of the game, the movement is completely different compared to the rest of the game. And in this one, I like these planets, but they're a little tedious. Do you agree? Would you agree with that?
Yeah, for somebody again who's going to play it fully to 100%, I'm going to get all that stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and it's going to take
Same.
a while. But we were talking earlier about how we're putting so many different kinds of games into this game. Open world gaming was just in extreme infancy, if anything, at this point. So
Mm-hmm.
that was their take at open world gaming. Basically, that one section was that's how you got to experience an open world, quote unquote, was you have this boundless desert or this boundless tundra and go get your stuff, and you have to figure out how you're going to get there, and you're going to have to figure out how to defeat the enemies. You've got to get the stuff, and then you come back, and then you get rewarded. So I don't know. I like it, but it's like that part is always something I save for like the
Yeah,
um
because
last
otherwise
thing
it's
to
just
do.
otherwise it's just
Yeah.
tedious, and it takes, and there's platinum bolts hidden on there too, and they're
Mm.
impossible to find unless you know where you're looking. It's a pain. Um, all right, I think we've kind of talked enough about this. We're almost at an hour and a half. I think we are at a place we can start wrapping this up.
Yeah.
Um, we've talked about uh, so many different aspects of the gameplay. We've talked about I think just the biggest thing I can say about this game, the most important thing about this game, is just the sheer amount of stuff they added to the series is just incredible, especially in less than a year. Like they released this game a year after the first one, and the size between the first game and this game is astounding. I'm amazed at how big this game is compared to the first one, and how different but the same it is. And there's just so many different ideas that they crammed into this. And I've listed them before. I'm going to list them one more time. You have the arenas. You have these giant open world planets that for the collectibles. You have the hover bike races. You have the beat 'em up uh, 3D planet, the spherical planets, whether it's with a fight with Clank or you're just platforming as Ratchet. You have, oh my, I'm blanking on stuff. Like I know
The
there's stuff that
ships.
the
The
ships, yes,
ships.
sorry, the
Yeah.
ships.
Yeah. And then you've just got platforming slash first person, third person shooter elements and
Mm-hmm.
puzzle elements, and there's a whole ton. Like this game is technically like, I think it's probably platformer or action adventure. That's probably what they call it in a genre, but it's very all encompassing for a game and so early in 3D gaming, like the realm of 3D gaming from where we are now.
Yeah,
It's crazy.
and it's just, but it's executed so well. Like it still holds up. It still is
Absolutely.
fun to play. That's
So,
the
and
crazy thing.
I was going to say the other thing earlier when you were saying you played the trilogy in the HD remake. The last HD remake of this trilogy was for the PS3 in 2012. We have not had a re release since then,
Unless you count
which
the remake of the original,
I
which
don't.
do you
I
not like
don't.
the remake?
No, I like it as its own thing. It's not a remake to me. It's like it's the movie
It's
version.
a I was so bummed by that movie.
Yeah,
I And it's not because I didn't like, I understood they were going to tell the same story as the original game, but I think what killed me was that they just took cutscenes from the game and spliced it in with the movie.
yeah.
They created a couple extra cutscenes to fill it out, but they just took cutscenes from the game. I'm like, if I wanted to watch cutscenes from the game, I would just play the game.
You can do
Like,
that. Yeah, you can just go into settings and do that
like,
or
ah,
whatever.
I was so mad at that. Because it could have been so much better. And the fact that like I'm still amazed in that game, you have Sylvester Stallone in that movie.
Yeah,
Isn't
that's
that
right.
wild? Victor Von whatever his face is, I forget what his name
Yeah,
is. But yeah, no. I actually like the remake, reimagining as they call it, a lot for its gameplay. For its story, it's not so much, but the gameplay is still
yeah,
fantastic.
that's
Still
fine.
some of
But
the best.
I just think it's like for such a beloved trilogy, especially, and even now when you look at the PS3 games, they still, I mean, technically they're old now, but you know, they hold up really well, and they have a good storyline. And I think it would behoove Insomniac to put out another trilogy remake, and then maybe do like a remake, like all on one disc of the PS3 era stuff as well.
That would be
And
cool.
that would be really awesome, because now we're in the PS5 and the PS3 is two generations back from that. There's no backwards compatibility. PS2 is four generations back from that now. And it's like, we got the new game, which I mean, I don't know how long it took us waiting for that, but you know what I mean? Like, it's just, I feel like a being a Ratchet and Clank fan is like a struggle to get some content out of it. You know what I
And it's
mean?
so strange because they still sell well. They always, even their shitty ones, sell well.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't actually think there's a Ratchet and Clank is a series where I don't think there is a bad game in them. I'm not saying they're all like the best. Like I even think like All for One is still relatively fun. Full Frontal Assault, as weird as of an idea it is, like a tower defense combined with Ratchet and Clank, and that game specifically is a little too meme lordy. If you remember, like they play
Mm-hmm.
Gangnam Style in it and stuff like
Yeah,
that.
I do remember
Um,
that.
it because that was the timely like meme song or whatever. So it just
Mm-hmm.
like it's still a fun game. And even what is it? What's the other like kind of offshoot one? There's like three kind of offshoots. You had Full Frontal Assault, you had All for One, and there was another one. I am blanking on what it was called.
On PS3, PS2,
I think it was on PS3.
PS3 had Crack in Time, Future Tools of Destruction, Into the Nexus.
No, never
Full
mind. It
for
was Into the Nexus, but that's kind of more of a traditional Ratchet and Clank
that one
game.
was Deadlocked on the PS2 was not
Yes.
traditional.
No, it was still fun though.
Mm-hmm.
It was still a really good game. Like none of the Ratchet and Clank games that should be bad, like should be because they're so different from the rest of the series. They're not bad. They're just different. I'm not, and
Different.
they're not as good as I think the baseline series. I think the baseline series is just I don't want to say perfect, but they're pretty damn good. Into the Nexus is really good. I feel like no one talks about that game enough. That game was amazing.
Yeah, I do feel like that PS3 era doesn't get enough love, but I also think that it's hard to when that original trilogy is just right now it's perfect and it's nostalgic. The PS3 doesn't have the nostalgia yet, so it gets kind of hidden.
Well, and like the first game is a little rough around the edges, but it's the first game, so you're going to, you know, it's going to stick in your mind more. The second game literally broke boundaries for the series. It like we've been talking about this whole episode. It broke boundaries for the series. It really set the table for everything to come with the series. And I'm assuming it does similarly with a Rift Apart, but I haven't played a Rift Apart yet, and neither of you, so I don't know what they've changed in that new one just yet. So listeners who have played it, don't spoil it for us, please. We're huge Ratchet and Clank fans who are just too poor to buy a PS5.
Or send me a PS5 so I can play it.
Yeah, seriously.
I'll wait for that.
So, or send me both. That'd be great. Or, you know, subscribe to my Patreon, patreon.com/stillloadingpod, and I can save up for a PS5
Ooh.
bit by bit. But it this game set it up. And then the third game was just it introduced like the third game I don't want to go into it because I eventually will do an episode on Up Your Arsenal as well. It just amplified it even further. Like it added so much to it. It created probably one of the best villains of any video game ever, not because he's actually all that villainous, but because he's just memorable. I think Richard Horowitz did the voice of him. I'm blanking on it right now, but I'm going to look it up right now. But it the voice of it's Dr. Nefarious is the villain of the third game, and it's just incredible. Like some of the best. It's got so much great gameplay. It's just amazing. Armin Shimmerman is the voice of Dr. Nefarious, and he was on Star Trek.
Mm. Interesting.
He played like an alien thing on Star Trek, and like a really
Huh.
famous character in it. I don't know it all that well. And there was apparently a Ratchet and Clank Life of Pi short, like a animated short in 2021.
What?
Yeah, I
Weird.
have no idea. I might try to find that. But yeah, I mean, it came out, I guess, at the same time as A Rift Apart. So there we go. But
That makes sense.
yeah, so I wonder if it ties in with it in some way, shape, or form. I don't know. But he does the voice of Dr. Nefarious, and Dr. Nefarious is like one of the best villains, just period. And like the character is super memorable. The voice is insane. I love Dr.
Lawrence.
Yes, sir, or whatever. I love there's like nothing behind those eyes of Lawrence. It's so funny.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my god. Anyway,
And
we
then
should
and Dr. Nefarious always switches to that like black and white
that
TV
soap
situation.
opera, that like
Yeah.
soap opera, and there's always something like, I didn't cheat on you with your brother. I cheated on you with like zombie ninja pandas
Yeah.
or something
Yeah.
like. It's always something insane. Like they make fun of soap operas in the best possible way.
So good.
Uh, but okay, we should wrap this up. Final thoughts, Kelly. Final thoughts on Ratchet and Clank Going Commando.
I think I can't say that it's my favorite because I have to say that my favorite's the first one because of how important it is to me. But I think this is an extremely close second in the entire series as far as my favorites. And it is a game that holds replay value even 15, 20 years later for me. And it doesn't matter if it's on the PS2 or if it's on the PS3 remake, I'm going to play it anyway. But yeah, it was such a good game, so fantastic. And if you have not played this series yet, I don't know why you're listening, but you should definitely play it and get the first one and then play the second one so you can really enjoy the full experience of watching it evolve.
For me, this game just it like I've said 1,000 times, it cemented what the Ratchet and Clank series would become. It created the series for all intents and purposes. The the original game set a great basically it threw all the elements out there, and while the found if they would have stuck with what the original one was, it would have been fine. It would have still been a good series, but I truly think this is the game that turned the series into what it is now and made it a great, like a phenomenal series. One one final thing we forgot to mention, and it's a minor thing, sort of. In the original game, if you want to switch weapons and you want to go to the weapon wheel, it does not pause the game. You can still get shot and get killed when you're trying to switch weapons. In this one, it pauses it and it allows you time and space to think about what you want to do next. And that's huge. And they made the game a little bit more frenetic so to accommodate for that. So it just added so much. I mean, I listed it all before. I'm not going to do it again. There's so much to it. Um, I love this game, and I think if you have not played a Ratchet and Clank game, in all honesty, what I tell people, start with this one. If you don't like this one, then like you can play some of the newer ones too. But like if you're looking to go back to see like where things started, play this one. The first one is still fun, but it's definitely rough around the edges. This one is a lot more polished. It's a lot more streamlined. It's got a lot more. It's a lot more user friendly. It's a lot more fair to the player. It's just a great game. So that's my final thought on this. It's one of the best games ever, and you should 100% go play it. So that will do it for this episode of the Still Loading podcast. We have gone on for an hour and 40 minutes. Probably when I edit all my bullshit out of like forgetting what place we were at, it's going to be like an hour and 30, maybe hour 35. Who knows? I don't know why I shout out the time code way too often on these on these episodes. So let's wrap this game. Sorry, let's wrap this episode up. Kelly, where can everybody find you online, and what would you like to promote?
So if you are a fan of, obviously you are, video game podcasts, you can hear me and my co-host Bo talk video games, and we also talk craft beers on the Precisely podcast, and you can find us on Instagram at Precisely Podcast. You can check out what we're drinking. You can see what shenanigans we get up to. We have a pretty loose, episode. We get some banter going. We talk about video game collecting. We talk about uh, video games that we like to play, and we talk about the market and everything in between. And we have a great time, and we get to drink a lot of cool beers while doing it. So check us out there. If you'd like to see myself and what I personally get up to as far as video game collecting, you can find me on Instagram at Highway to Kel.
That is like one of the best Instagram handles ever. I'm just going to say that. Like,
I have to say, the way I found this out was when I was deciding what Instagram name to make myself. How many years ago? I don't know. I literally wrote every pun I could think of, including my name, on a sheet of paper. And I was like just looking at like, was it available basically without having to do like an underscore or a period or a zero instead of an O or something like that. Because I had things like Saved by the Kel or, stuff like that. And actually like my Xbox name is Taco Kel, which is a play on Taco Bell. So it's just like I just make puns with my name, so that works really well. But yeah, that was my chosen one that was available out of I don't know how many I thought of, probably at least 30. I like puns.
I like the name a lot. But as usual for me, you can follow me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at StillLoadingPod on all of them. If you want to email me, you can email me stillloadingcontact@gmail.com. If you want to support the show, you can do that in a number of ways. You can give it a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts or whichever podcasting app you use, because not only does that help people find the show, but it also makes me feel warm and fuzzy. And I like feeling warm and fuzzy. So give it a 5-star rating or review if you don't mind. If you want to support the show monetarily, you can go to patreon.com/stillloadingpod for $1 a month. You'll get each of the episodes a few days earlier at a higher bit rate, as well as access to a patron exclusive Discord. If you want to support at the $5 level, you'll get all of that plus access to 2 extra bonus episodes released per month. This, at the time of this recording, you may actually hear the same thing that I recorded 2 weeks in a row, because the next week after this is a Captain N episode where I reference the same thing. But I recorded a retro magazine review where I looked at one of my old gaming magazines and I flipped through and I just talk about some of the weird shit that you would see in old gaming magazines. This one I did the October 2000 issue of the official PlayStation magazine and see what they were talking about back in October of 2000 in the gaming sphere, at least in the PlayStation sphere of gaming. So patreon.com/stillloadingpod if you want to check that out. But the most important shout out is the Bit by Bit Foundation. The Bit by Bit Foundation is a nonprofit organization whose mission is to put video games and video game consoles in the hands of kids receiving inpatient care at hospitals. So if you want to support them, go to bitbybitfoundation.org and consider donating. And that will do it for this episode of the Still Loading Podcast. Thank you all so much for listening. Kelly, thank you once again for joining me. I thank you for doing this. We spent a good long time talking Ratchet Clank, and it was great to have you on.
Yeah, it was a blast. Thank you so much for having me, and it was great. It was serendipitous to run into you at Too Many Games out of all of those people and then get this ball rolling.
It was it really was, and it worked out perfectly. So thank you all for listening, and I will see you all next time.